Now you go to verse 13 and 14. Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. You'll notice the spelling here is not S-T-R-A-I-G-H-T. It's spelled S-T-R-A-I-T, kind of like you would spell the Straits of Magellan or the Strait of Gibraltar. It's this narrow, difficult, at times feels dangerous passageway that's not broad, that every road is going to take you where you need to go. No, it's very specific. Do the things which you have seen me do. Not all roads lead to Rome in this context. So then in 15 through 20, he talks about false prophets. And he gives this command, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing. Inwardly, they are ravening wolves. So outwardly, they look calm, lambs, very gentle, but inwardly, they're ravening wolves.
We could give just a brief example. I don't know if Jesus had this one particularly in mind, but about a generation before the time of Jesus, there was another man with the same name, Jesus, who rose up and convinced all these Jews in the Galilean region that if they followed him, they could overthrow the Roman occupiers. And it didn't turn out very well. It turns out the Romans didn't like the rebellion, and so they captured many of these rebellious people, including this leader, and they crucified them. Thousands of these Jews were killed because they followed a false leader instead of seeking to learn from the real master. So again, I don't know if Jesus had this in mind, but Jesus was aware that in every generation of human history, there are people who will teach you whatever you want to hear for their gain, so they can have more power. And you look at what Jesus does. Does Jesus ever teach things simply so he can get more power? That's not how he operated. So we have to be careful in our world today that we listen to people who have Jesus's best interests in mind and not just their own.
It's beautiful. Now, this next concept is one that they would have understood probably better than most of us in our context today, because these are people who had to live largely off of the land to one degree or another. So he says, ye shall know them. How do you tell the difference between a good prophet and a false prophet? You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Do you go to a thistle and start picking figs? No. You know a plant or a tree by its fruits.
And by the way, figs and grapes were often the desserts and the sweetest things they know. So it's like the really good stuff. He didn't mention carrots or potatoes or rutabaga or vegetables. He's talking about the things that people really are driven to want to eat on a regular basis because of their taste.
In today's culture, in our world society today, there seems to be less of a focus on the fruits and more of people looking to the roots and trying to dig up dirt on people and look to the past and say, well, look at what he did here or there, or what he did wrong here from our perspective, judging people through a cultural lens from the 21st century, looking back in time and holding all these people in the history of the world accountable for our current perspectives. And by their roots, they're finding these perceived problems and plucking out the whole tree. I love this idea that it's by their fruits ye shall know them. You partake of the fruits of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Are you going to be able to dig up dirt on past leaders and on past practices and on historical events in the church or in any of the scripture characters' lives? Absolutely. Except for Jesus Christ himself, you're going to find struggles in the roots. But it doesn't mean that we pluck up the whole tree and throw it out because we've identified that that root looks bad. At the end of the day, I don't know that I'm qualified to tell you which roots are good and which roots are bad anyway, when it comes right down to it. But I can tell when something tastes good when it sits right, when it strengthens me, when I feel empowered to be a better person because of it. And I love that invitation from Jesus to judge righteously and to distinguish between false and true prophets by their fruits, not by going into their past and trying to dig up any dirt that we can on them. So he finalizes that in verse 20 with a statement to reiterate what he's taught up above. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them.